Baseball has always worshipped its heroes Ruth, Mays, Jeter, Griffey names etched in golden light. But what about the ones carved in shadows? The ones we don't cheer for, but never forget. What about the players who broke the rules, broke their teammates, broke the game and sometimes smiled while doing it? From spikes that shattered careers to scandals that tainted championships. From steroids to sign stealing to Twitter meltdowns. This isn't the story of triumph. This is the story of baseball's most despised, disgraced, and dangerously unforgettable players. Because in a game built on honor, the villains are the ones who test what that word even means. And some of them tested it to the edge. This is every MLB villain explained. Baseball, they say, is America's pastime, a game of poise, precision, and patience. But beneath the surface of pinstripes and pine tar lies a darker, messier truth. The game has always needed its villains, the players we boo from the bleachers. The ones who spike first and apologize never, the ones who cheat, lie, fight, or smirk their way into the public's collective outrage. But what makes a villain in baseball? Is it violence on the field, deceit off of it, or the simple sin of arrogance wrapped in talent? Some were hated for what they did, others for who they were, and some well. Some seem to like it that way. This is not a story about stats. It's a story about reputation, about the thin, fraying line between greatness and infamy. We begin, not with a slugger or a scoundrel, but with a slight and unassuming moment that detonated into controversy. Chase Utley was never supposed to be that guy. From 2006 to 2010, he was arguably the best second baseman in baseball elite power, surgical, plate discipline, and a fearless presence on the base paths. But in the 2015 NLCS, that aggression turned from admirable to unforgivable. With the Mets looking to turn a double play, Utley barreled into shortstop Ruben Tejada not just late, but recklessly. With enough force to shatter Tejada's fibula and derail his career, the slide wasn't just controversial, it was career-defining. Mets fans didn't just boo, they grieved. Tejada was never the same, and MLB had to rewrite its own rules, instituting the now infamous Utley rule, which mandates that slides must be bona fide attempts to reach the bag, not assassination missions, disguised as hustle. And yet, while Tejada faded into anonymity, Utley kept playing, stoic, unrepentant. A villain not by self-identification, but by consequence. But if Utley became a villain by action, Trevor Bauer did it with his mouth. Bauer was a pitcher with both talent and turbulence, blistering stuff on the mound and blistering takes off of it. In 2020, he won the NL Cy Young with a sparkling 1.73 ERA, but his performance could never outrun his personality, combative online, frequently trolling critics, and infamous for weaponizing his social media following to swarm anyone who disagreed. With him, Bauer turned every outfield interaction into a theater of confrontation. Then came 2021 assault allegations, a suspension, a fall from the game so steep it left craters. Though never convicted and settling civilly, Bauer became radioactive. He fled to Japan, called himself the best pitcher in the world, and promptly put up one of the worst eras in the league. The irony was almost too rich. Once a Cy Young winner, now a cautionary tale. Baseball didn't just turn the page on Bauer, it closed the book. But if Bauer fell from grace, Barry Bonds never cared about grace in the first place. Bonds wasn't just a great hitter, he was a statistical anomaly, a walking impossible. 760 home runs, 73 in a single season, more intentional walks than some players have hits. But the shadow that followed him was longer than any ball he hit into McCovey Cove. The Balco investigation, the clear and the cream, the grand jury testimony, where flaxseed oil became a punchline, Bonds became the face of the steroid era. Whether he wanted it or not, fans felt betrayed, records shattered, history rewritten, and yet, for all the ire and ink spilled in protest, Bonds was never convicted of using Pez. He was convicted of obstruction of protecting the lie, but in the Hall of Fame vote, fans and writers decided that was enough. Year after year, he came close, but never cleared the 75% needed, and now, time's up, he's out. And the most dominant hitter in modern baseball is on the outside looking in. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because we weren't willing to forget how he got there. Baseball loves its records, but it loves its myths even more, and Bonds shattered both. If Barry Bonds cracked the game's soul with a syringe, Manny Machado did it with a sneer, a spike, and a lack of hustle so profound it became performance art. For years, Machado has been a paradox of platinum glove in the field, a slugger at the plate, and a lightning rod everywhere else. His stats are solid gold, .283 average, a point for 8A slugging, a 125 ops plus, and multiple gold gloves. But if greatness was measured in effort, Machado's reputation would be in the basement. He's been called dirty, lazy, and selfish, and not entirely without reason. In 2017, he slid hard into Dustin Pedroia, spiking the veteran second baseman in a move many saw as unnecessary and vindictive. Pedroia's career effectively ended after that. No apology, no accountability, just another chapter in the Manny Chronicles. But it wasn't just the spikes, it was the strolls. Machado became infamous for not running out grounders, not hustling to first, not giving that extra gear when the moment called for it, and worse, he didn't seem to care. His 2018 quote, "I'm not the type of player that's going to be Johnny Hustle," became a brand, a middle finger to every fan who ever screamed "run it out" from the bleachers. And now in San Diego, despite being a cornerstone of the Padres roster, the whispers persist. Is he playing for wins or just for money? And speaking of money, no villain list is complete without Anthony Rendon, the $245 million man who disappeared in plain sight. With the Nationals, Rendon was a silent assassin, .319, point for 1 .598 in 2019, leading them to a World Series and looking like the future of third base. Then came the contract with the Angels. Then came nothing. Since 2020, Rendon has played fewer than 60 games per season, not just hurt invisible. And when he did suit up, the numbers were a shadow of what they once were. But what truly turned fans against him wasn't the injuries, it was the attitude, the seeming indifference, the excuses. The fact that websites now track how much he's been paid per game missed, with many calling his deal the worst contract in MLB history. Almost $100 million earned for less than a season's worth of games. Even Angels fans, some of the most forgiving in the league, have run out of patience. Because in baseball, injuries may earn sympathy. Apathy never does. If Rendon faded due to absence, Carlos Beltrán was erased by scandal. Once viewed as one of the most intelligent, professional hitters of his generation, Beltrán's legacy imploded when he was outed as a ringleader of the Astros' 2017 sign-stealing scheme. He wasn't just part of the plan, he was reportedly the veteran presence pushing younger players to adopt it, even discouraging them from cooperating with MLB investigators. The fallout was swift. Beltrán, newly hired to manage the Mets, was fired before he managed a single game. The title the Astros won that year, forever tainted. Beltrán's Hall of Fame hopes, doomed. He went from respected leader to digital pariah, a name that now lives in the footnotes of baseball's most tech-savvy cheating scandal. What Bonds did with chemistry, Beltrán did with cameras. And while one denied involvement, the other never even got a chance to explain. Reputation collapsed under silence. But at least Beltrán had a career worth defending. A.J. Pierzynski didn't care about reputation at all. He was baseball's chaos agent. The guy nobody liked, not his opponents, not the fans, sometimes not even his teammates. He was loud, abrasive, and always in the middle of something ugly. In 2006, he barreled into Cubs catcher Michael Barrett, igniting a bench-clearing brawl that made headlines and cemented his status as public enemy one in Chicago at least. On the north side, polls regularly voted him the most hated player in baseball. White Sox manager Ozzie Guillen famously said, "If you play against him, you hate him. If you play with him, you hate him a little less." And Pierzynski wore that hate like a badge. He never tried to be liked. He just wanted to win while making sure you hated every second of it. In a way, That makes him one of the sport's purest villains, not because he cheated, not because he lied, but because he enjoyed being the guy everyone wanted to punch. And sometimes that role is necessary. Every story needs an antagonist. AJ just chose to be his own. There are villains you love to hate, and then there are villains you just hate. No drama, no complexity, just pure contempt carved out by years of selfishness, arrogance, or outright cruelty. Enter Jonathan Papelbon, a closer with a cannon arm, and a fuse so short it could barely last an inning. Papelbon didn't just pitch with swagger, he radiated it, weaponized it, often turned it against his own team. His worst moment wasn't on the mound, but in the dugout when he grabbed Bryce Harper, the franchise face of the Washington Nationals, by the throat and shoved him against the wall mid-game on national television for not running out a fly ball. That's not leadership. That's sabotage. This came just days after Papelbon was suspended for throwing at Manny Machado's head-up pitch that many believed was deliberate, personal, and stupid. He wasn't just combative with opponents, he was combative with everybody: fans, coaches, teammates, reporters. His resume includes 368 career saves and a World Series ring. But it reads like a rap sheet: profanity-laced tirades, obscene gestures, clubhouse toxicity, a manager openly frustrated by his presence, and through it all, Papelbon acted like the misunderstood hero, but no one else saw it that way. Not Boston, not Philadelphia, not Washington, not even the city that threw the last pitch of his career. Because in baseball, being a jerk can sometimes be forgiven if you know when to shut up. Papelbon never did. And then there's Curt Schilling, once the hero of the 2004 Red Sox, the man with the bloody sock and the postseason pedigree. He was everything Boston fans dreamed of: gritty, fearless, ice-cold under pressure. He should have been a Hall of Famer by unanimous vote. But Schilling didn't stop pitching when his career ended. He just changed the target. And this time, it was everyone: Muslims, trans people, journalists, political opponents. ESPN suspended him, then fired him. His Twitter became a fire hose of vitriol. He praised the January 6th Capitol rioters. He mocked survivors of violence. He spun conspiracies so outlandish they wouldn't survive a Reddit thread. And all the while, he doubled down over and over again, forcing Hall of Fame voters to ask a painful question: can you separate performance from person? In Schilling's case, many said no. His final year on the ballot came and went, and the bloody sock didn't bleed quite enough to wash away the rest. He didn't just tarnish his legacy, he incinerated it and stood proudly in the flames. If Schilling burned his own bridge, John Rocker never even bothered to build one. In 1999, Rocker detonated his career in the span of one Sports Illustrated interview, calling immigrants debris, mocking minorities, making racist, homophobic, xenophobic rants so toxic that MLB suspended him for 2 weeks just to catch its breath. He became the league's most hated man overnight. Fans loathed him. Players despised him. Teams regretted signing him before the ink dried. He needed police escorts to stadiums. Death threats followed him, and Rocker, he doubled down, admitted to using steroids, said who wasn't, shrugged off every ounce of accountability like it was gum stuck to his cleats. He didn't just offend, he destroyed. His career flamed out before he turned 30, and not because he couldn't throw a fastball, but because he couldn't shut his mouth. He was the kind of villain who made even his supporters uncomfortable, the kind of villain who didn't belong in rivalries but in exile. And finally, we reach Braun, perhaps the most calculated fall from grace in baseball's recent history. In 2011, Braun was the Golden Boy NL MVP, smiling face of the Milwaukee Brewers. Everything right with the game. Then came the positive test for elevated testosterone. But Braun didn't own up. He went nuclear. He accused the sample collector of tampering, of anti-Semitism. He said the test was flawed, that the science was wrong, that he would bet his life he had never taken PEDs. He sued. He raged. And then, in 2013, the biogenesis scandal broke everything. Braun was exposed. He was using And worse, he lied to everyone, his teammates, his fans, the media. The man he falsely accused had his career destroyed. Braun served a 65-game suspension and returned, but nothing was the same. Not his numbers, not his image. He had betrayed the game and dragged someone else down with him. He didn't just cheat. He gaslighted a nation, and that's why, for so many, Ryan Braun's fall stings more than any other, because it wasn't just about Pez. It was about betrayal, and in baseball, trust is harder to earn than a ring and a hell of a lot easier to lose. What makes a baseball villain unforgettable isn't just what they did, it's the shadow they left behind. Because stats fade, contracts expire, but reputations, they stick. They haunt, they follow, and sometimes the most dangerous villains aren't the loudest ones, they're the ones who blended just long enough to rewrite the story in their favor. Baseball is a game obsessed with redemption, with comebacks and second chances. But not all sins are forgiven equally. Some wounds, never close, and some names once whispered with reverence are now spat with disgust. Because when the game is betrayed, it remembers, and it reminds. In every documentary, every Hall of Fame debate, every bitter Twitter thread filled with what-ifs and how dare theys. What these players share isn't a uniform or a position. It's a legacy of disruption. Chase Utley shattered a man's leg and never looked back. Trevor Bauer weaponized arrogance into alienation. Barry Bonds rewrote baseball's record books in ink that still smudges. Manny Machado turned talent into apathy. Anthony Rendon vanished in plain sight while cashing checks the size of small countries. Carlos Beltrán, a mastermind in the shadows, never swung another bat in peace. A.J. Pierzynski made being hated his entire brand. Jonathan Papelbon fought teammates like enemies. Curt Schilling bled for Boston, then bled integrity dry. John Rocker burned every bridge and laughed at the ashes. And Ryan Braun, he smiled into cameras, betrayed his city, and then watched it all collapse under the weight of a lie. These aren't just anti-heroes. They're warnings, proof that in a game built on rules, the real penalties don't always come from umpires. Sometimes they come from memory, from legacy, from the fans who never forgot. And yet for all their flaws, all their scandals, all their broken promises, these men were part of something bigger. They shaped the game, defined an era, not always for the better, but undeniably, because baseball, like any great story, needs conflict, needs tension, needs the boos as much as the cheers. Villains push the narrative forward. They sharpen the contrast. They make the heroes shine brighter. And deep down, we know the truth. Without villains, there is no redemption. Without betrayal, no forgiveness. Without disgrace, no glory. That's why we still talk about them. Why we watch the replays. Why we remember every spike, every choke, every swing, every scandal. Not because we love them, but because we love the game they complicated. Baseball doesn't forget its villains, and neither do we asterisk in a sport built on myth, precision, and reverence for its past. The players we love to hate are just as essential as the ones we admire. They broke rules, broke trust, and sometimes broke the game itself. But in doing so, they revealed what the sport values most: honor, effort, and integrity. Their shadows still fall across the field. Their names still echo in arguments. Because in baseball, the villain doesn't just lose, they linger. And that, in its own dark way, is legacy too.